Much better. Okay, so you probably want to speak more into the mic than you did last time. So maybe like this. Like that? Do you think? It's probably better.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to the first content episode of
Nerdscapades.
Yay! So, last time we just kind of rambled on and on and on about how we were going to cover a bunch of different stuff, but this time we're actually going to be talking about the Tolkien movie that came out a while ago now. We're pretty behind.
We also didn't have this channel at that time, so...
Yeah. We're not to be blamed.
Yeah.
Sort
but
of.
We're kind of going to be looking at our initial thoughts on the movie, how we actually liked it, and then also kind of comparing it to the real life kind of biography.
Yeah, if this video ends up being super long, what I'll do is I'll give you guys a timestamp so that if you only want to hear a review about how we feel about the movie, then that's what can happen. But if you want a little bit more than that, we can do a second half for like
Part 2s.
How accurate may this be? Sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So with that, the movie is an hour and 50 minutes long, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
We got through it in about 3 hours with our 2 kids. So.
Yes, exactly.
Really?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow, I was just guessing, but that makes sense. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
So.
Which, you know, to be a Tolkien movie, it has to take a long time. So.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. All right, so I think you should go first, since in this area I have a little more knowledge. There are obviously people out there who would put me to shame, but...
Yeah, I'm still kind of a newbie when it comes to Lord of the Rings and Tolkien. I've seen all the movies a few times, but to be honest, I haven't read the books. I've tried a couple times, but as we established, I don't really read.
No.
So I really like the movies. Coming to this movie, Tolkien, I really liked it. I thought it was really cool seeing the whole man behind the story kind of thing. Initially, I wasn't expecting it to be as much of a romance as it was. I kind of understood him to be more of a non-romantic type, like just into his story, and that's all from kind of what I understood.
Before we see any more,
spoilers.
yes, spoiler alerts. We're gonna, like, if you want to see it, pause, come back to us later, but that was your warning, so
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
But yeah, I thought it was really interesting how they portrayed it more as the romantic story and not just specifically like him as a writer. But from just the beginning scenes of the movie, you could see kind of like a take on his brain and how he was already starting to form some of the characters, like the Ents and stuff. Whenever he saw the reflection of a tree, he always kind of imagined it as being a living creature and stuff like that.
Right. So before you say any more, I wanted to touch base on the romance thing, because that was something that I guess I'll just let people know that being the huge nerd that I am, I took an honors class on Tolkien and his life and how he ended up making the worlds that he did. And I also, when I first really learned about Tolkien, was very, very surprised at what a romantic he seemed to be in reality. It was all very... you're just really surprised by how taken he was by Edith for the entirety of his life. I mean, truly, like, from the very beginning.
Yeah, I had no idea about that.
You didn't?
Aspect. I always just knew about, like, a head in the clouds type of
Oh, really?
Yeah,
just kind of like the savant that had
that was my impression.
Their focus, and like that's it. No, not at all. You know, it's always super strange to me. He's often people don't know for sure what to think about Tolkien. They think maybe he was a savant, you know. They also wonder if at some point in time he might have developed a mild to moderate case of schizophrenia. I know a lot of people claim that they saw him actively talking to trees and rambling on to himself. And I don't know. I mean, the way the movie kind of portrayed him seemed borderline. Is it creativity? Is it
schizophrenia?
Is he like seeing things? Yeah. Is it bugging him? Is it just feeding into his obsession? Are these his like imagination, or does he see these things? And I feel like in his early life, it kind of seemed like it was more imagination. But then towards when he was in wartime and everything, it seemed to be more of that
legitimate kind of.
He was going through some stuff.
Disassociation from reality.
Yes, and so that's what a lot of people think too when they claim to see him talking to trees out and about in his life. They're like, he went through some stuff, so we're not really sure. Even the professor that I had that studied medieval literature and everything, she was like, I'm not sure. So
yeah, I don't know. But if you do watch the movie, there are some cool fight scenes. That's kind of
yes.
my big thing.
Did you prefer that more than the romance, or were you pleasantly surprised?
I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was a really good storyline, but it was cool that there was still a dragon.
I know. Oh my gosh, that scene got me. Of all of the scene, there's a scene. Should we just like give an overview of the movie before we? Okay, so Tolkien is orphaned at a very young age. His mother, in the movie, she falls ill, or well, not really seemingly ill. She just kind of spontaneously dies one day when he gets back from
wherever he was. Yeah,
I think it was school or something. But he found her gone, and was very moved by that, and was left to be raised with a friar under the supervision of I'm forgetting her name, of a woman, of a relatively high-class woman, it seems, who takes in orphans. Yeah. Do you want to continue on, or do you want me to?
I think you have this down a little bit more.
I'm not talking about like real life. I'm just summarizing the movie.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah, and then in the movie it goes on to his schooling in a higher class school than a normal orphan would be able to get into. And just kind of showing his camaraderie that he's able to get with some of his classmates, and they create a club formed around literature and kind of changing the world is what they put it as.
Yep.
And kind of just goes with them as they age, and then they come to being of college age, and
by this point in time, Tolkien is taken with Edith, right? They've been growing up together. She was one of the orphans, just spending a lot of time together. He could confide in her. She was very, I would say she was very into the things that he would talk about. That she was more than just, listening. She was very interested. And it seemed in the movie that she contributed a lot to some of the thoughts that he had. Unfortunately, it would seem that she was the reason he failed to get where he wanted to go initially with school. He kind of flunked out, and had to, because the friar found out about him and Edith. He kind of insisted that they not see each other anymore, which was supposedly very heartbreaking for Tolkien.
Yeah. Which that would suck.
It would suck. And then, of course, the war came. We're kind of skipping a lot. He
Yeah.
couldn't afford schooling anymore. So he was supposedly this close to going and working a normal job. Which his friends like couldn't fathom because they were all very well-to-do people. But ultimately, he ended up discovering his love of philology, studying the aesthetics and the beauty of language and the meaning of language. And he was able to get back into school and afford it through a philology scholarship.
Yeah.
Which is really, really cool.
That's super cool.
That made me feel quite awesome. I don't know. It made me really happy for him. But anyway, then
the war happens.
Yes.
Everybody that he knows and himself end up going into the war.
And one thing that I really appreciate about that is the fact that they emphasized the fact that everyone was thrilled. The young men were thrilled to go serve their country. This is kind of what it was almost like the I want you thing, you know, like every time every time a big war happens, you see that young men are like, this is awesome. This is going to be the coolest thing ever. And then most of them go and they die. Yeah. Happens in the movie. All of his friends except one, I believe, died tragically in the war just a couple weeks before him, I believe. In the same area where he ended up going and getting trench fever. Sorry, excuse me.
A little bit more intense than just trench foot. But.
Yeah, trench fever. And he kind of gets to this delirious state. He thinks his friend is there still, one of his college friends. He hears his voice. He sees horrendous things. He sees... It's really quite beautiful in many ways. He sees a dragon breathing fire. And that took me by surprise because he's looking over the trench into enemy fire. And all he sees is this magnificent dark dragon, which is just beautiful. And
turns out it's just flamethrowers, but
it's breathing fire, and all of a sudden there's a flamethrower like in his face, and everyone's getting burned alive. Trigger warning. But the way they did it was very like you were just as surprised as his character might have been to wake up and see that, which I appreciated a lot. There's some other imagery that I think we could go into that now if you want to. Did you notice anything yourself about the imagery of him laying amongst slain soldiers in pools of blood? I mean, it's a lot darker than you think it is. So if you're into this kind of stuff and you might be interested in Tolkien's backstory, I highly recommend going and seeing it. I really enjoyed it.
I don't know. Along that whole scene, because it's kind of Tolkien, he's sick, and then he finds another soldier to kind of escort him through to find his friend. And
I have things to say. We'll get into that in a second.
Coincidentally, that other soldier's name was Sam.
We'll talk about this. And I'm glad you noticed.
Then I feel like it was just kind of like mirroring Sam and Frodo kind of throughout the whole
very good
thing.
Very good. But did you have any thoughts about why you were saying what you were saying? Did you think maybe this is why, or no, you just let it be a happy coincidence?
No, I thought maybe that was a like inspiration kind of.
Okay. Thought. So if you want me to get into that now, I can. But gosh, it's hard to figure out when to draw like the line for this. Because this is useful.
Yeah.
Because with Tolkien's upbringing, reality, even in real life, reality is not completely reality, which I love. But now that we're comparing the stories he wrote to, you know, his life, it's even more complicated. But anyway, So Tolkien, in the middle of this war, gets trench fever, and he is he's actually this man that is named Sam is actually kind of the equivalent of an officer's jockey, essentially. I'm trying to remember a Batman. One word, Batman. Who, at this point in time, these men were appointed to carry the belongings of officers. And it's noted many times. I'm just going to go into it really quick. You guys, if you're interested in Tolkien's background or his inspirations, the things he ended up deciding to use, and the things that really influenced his work from like mythology and linguistics and history, please consider buying this book. I love this book. I refer to this book all the time. I'm going to be honest with you. I've never read it cover to cover. It is a lot. Like, it just hurts your brain because it is a compilation of a ton of different research done by a bunch of different scholars, kind of put together in this one book by Christopher Snyder, The Making of Middle-earth, A New Look Inside the World of J.R.R. Tolkien. I will put a link down in the description box, so please check it out if you're interested. Highly recommend. Whether or not you're going to really dive into, I'll probably reference this again next time we cover Tolkien, honestly.
Like every time.
Like every time. I love it so,
it's a really
so
good
much.
book.
And the information I'm talking about is just in the first chapter today.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So
yeah, the whole movie pretty much is just the first chapter of the book.
It really is. It truly is.
So if you like the movie and you saw it and you want more of it, get this book.
Definitely. This book right here. What was I saying? The Batman. Okay,
yes.
So there was a lot of, well, surrounding Tolkien in general, there's a lot of discussion as to whether or not he was possibly racist. And I don't know if that's like just because of our current political climate, if it just kind of came up and people look for those things. And other people argue that he's very much a progressive person who was not okay with that sort of thing. They use, on the side of thinking he might be moderately racist, they use the racial separations between elves, man, and orcs and dwarves, yeah. And how they treat each other. But scholars often talk about how the entire purpose of the story is to unify these different groups of people in fellowship. So yeah. There's that. But also, in the midst of this trench during the war, people often complain about how Frodo talks down to Sam on their journey together. And Tolkien did admit that he was inspired partially for Frodo and Sam by soldiers and people there and everything. I don't want to misquote it, so I'm trying to think really hard on what I read. It was very quick. But Tolkien favored hanging out with the Batmans and the people of lower ranks. He did not like to hang out with the people who were his level.
Which, I mean, like, naturally, that's kind of
what happens,
and it's where he's kind of naturally from.
Right.
Like,
I mean, well, he's kind of surrounded by, like, scholars and academics and people who are from very well-to-do families.
Well, he's surrounded by them, but in, like, the movie,
he never feels like he is part of that. Yeah. And so he has an immense respect for these individuals of lower ranking. And in the movie, Sam also pulls Tolkien from pretty much death. Like, if he had not come to get him again, he would have laid there and died. But anyways, as Tolkien is laying there, surrounded by all these corpses and in a pool of blood, we are reminded of the, what are they called? Oh, no. Oh,
the
marshes. The marshes.
Marshes, yeah.
The marshes, where Frodo is walking through and he sees all these dead corpses in the water. So I thought that was kind of like a, you know, a nod to that. There was something else. I might remember that again in a minute. I have notes that I can look at so that it doesn't just totally escape me. But yes, there's that. What else happens after that? He comes to,
gets back up. He's going up into kind of the peak of battle area.
Yes. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. He thinks he hears his friend's voice from back home who had gone to the same area, calling out to him, and he goes over this probably did not happen.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm willing to bet this did not happen.
License.
Yes, there was a lot of artistic license, but I think it was beautifully done. I think the symbolism and everything was just out of this world for me anyway. But he goes, and there are people being blown up left and right, caught on fire. There are like mangled bodies hanging off of what is remnants of trees, which I also think is symbolic because he has such a deep love for the earth and for trees and for things, and you'll see that a lot in the movie too, and in the books, obviously. I think a majority of the books is in his descriptions of nature. Yeah. Truly, like most of it is he's describing the scenery, and that's so beautiful. But yes, there are people just destroyed, and he sees his friend, but he runs over to him and he finds that it's not actually his friend. He was hallucinating. And then he there's also the white horse symbolism. That one's pretty in your face. There were also, I want to say there were the kings.
Yeah,
the kings and Sauron.
Yeah, there were definitely
in these
nods to like black horses and the riders with
and
swords.
There was just swords and the way they thrusted Nazgul.
Yeah.
The way they thrusted through the soldiers with their swords was even reminiscent of like when they were stabbing the beds with Frodo and the other hobbits in them. I mean, it was just awesome. I was very impressed by that. But anyway, he goes unconscious after all this crazy stuff that he may have believed he was actually seeing, or which I mean, I feel like that's what they were intending. Yeah. He was delirious. And he wakes up to Edith, who, before he had gone to war, was engaged to be married because they had broken off. Yeah. But he convinced her to wait for him, which is just beautiful, and that actually did happen in real life, I think. So I think that she really was engaged because of their separation, and he really did meet with her, and she really did call off her engagement before he went to war.
I think that is a good tie-in point of how does the movie compare to real life. Like, it was really good, and being me not knowing much of his actual real life, I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. But you know a lot more of the actual facts from...
I've been kind of doing this as we've been going. The reality is there was a lot of artistic license. You know, we do not know whether Tolkien was clinically insane or if he had a wild imagination. We do not know exactly how he handled, meeting new friends at school. So it might have made him out to be more of an outcast than he may have been. But because of his social upbringing, there's a good possibility it was true. As far as, his relationship with Edith starting in childhood, I think it was, in real life, I believe it wasn't as romanticized.
Oh, okay.
So, in the movie, he hears the piano being played beautifully in another room, and he peeks through, and he sees the back of Edith's head with her beautiful black hair, and he's just taken by her immediately. But all I'm aware of is, I know that people say he was madly in love with her, and, he based so many of his characters off of her. Elvish characters, beautiful characters, a ton. So there's no question whether he was taken with her, but I do wonder if it was kind of making romance out of children.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he was like maybe... I'm trying to...
Young teens is what it seemed like from...
Yeah, it's in here too.
Yeah.
I didn't pay super close attention to it. He was very young when his mother died, is all I know. But in the movie, yes, he was a young teenager. Maybe like 12 or something.
Yeah.
So that was pretty legitimate. They did grow up together in the same household, I believe. And, you know, he did have that club with the boys. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of different stuff in school. He was very accomplished. I don't know if he was... I mean, he very well could have been the kid that they took his book in class when he was supposed to recite something to pick on him when he was a new kid, and he just, like, stood up and recited it from memory. Like a genius.
Pretty cool.
He was brilliant. So, I don't know. I haven't done that much research, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like Christopher Tolkien had said something about either in the making of the movie or after it came out, because he died in January of 2020. He was 96 years old.
Man.
Yeah. He said that I'm pretty sure he said he was happy with the movie and their rendition of it. So who knows how much of it's true. But yeah. I really enjoyed the nod to storytelling from both his mother and the way he and Edith carried that on to their children. That was very legitimate. A ton of Tolkien's works were intended just for his kids. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of blew up, and I mean, we're grateful. But it was awesome. The wartime stuff was very legitimate. He was lucky over and over again to get sick. I'm not kidding. He was very lucky multiple times, and I feel like he probably would have been a goner if he had gone at any other time. So that was cool. And then he did come back to Edith. They did have their family, and he did go on to be everything we know him to be. So I overall am very happy with the film. I think the artistic license, I don't know, but it was beautiful. Yeah. I appreciated it, whatever they took from it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure I covered everything. Okay. Yes, his mother had died, it turns out, from a diabetic coma. And then in the movie, I kind of talked about this, but there's a lot of nature scenes from his early childhood, which most children before the age of 3 don't pay attention to anything or remember anything. So I don't know that he would have remembered where he was a baby from, but that's kind of where they believe he got a lot of his visionary, like...
Okay.
Because he moved from this beautiful natural place to that city. And in real life, he was very upset about it. Yeah. He was not a happy camper. And a lot of people think he had PTSD, which would make sense. I
mean, World War I was pretty crazy.
Absolutely. So. And in the movie they did, when he was talking to his friend's mother, he said, the ones that did get out, we didn't get out, like, without wounds. They're just of a different kind. So that was interesting. We talked about the dragon fire, the marshes. Yes. So Tolkien did admit that his experiences at war did contribute to some of the scenes in the books that he wrote of, like the marshes.
Okay.
But not as much as what he said was the house of the holdings or the roots of the mountains, or like some other literary works that I have not looked into. So I'm not a medievalist or anything, so I don't know. But we talked about Sam. I'm super glad you picked up on that on your own. And Tolkien supposedly believed that, or didn't believe, but he found... How do I say this? He had a big question of morality. He didn't divide his races based on their physical appearance or anything. He divided them based on like morality. And so I believe he felt that goblins represented, or sorry, orcs. Have to say goblins and ghouls, and so no, not ghouls. Goblins and gnomes are the terms that he often used for like elves and orcs. Mm-hmm. But goblins were based off of, orcs were based off of the evil on both sides of wartime, not just one side. So that's cool. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to talk about regarding this movie? I thought it was really great. I thought it would not be that good. It went by really fast. Yeah. Even though we had to stop a bunch of times, it was very interesting.
Yes. It was a good movie.
Very fast. Really was just his life. It did not really dive too much into any of the things we really know him for. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you learned a lot?
I do. I think I learned a bit about him and the man behind the book and stuff.
Books.
Books. Yeah.
Many books. Yes. So,
tell us what you think in the comments. If you liked the movie, if you didn't like the movie, what you didn't like about the movie. If you think we're full of baloney.
That's fair. You know, so many things regarding Tolkien are kind of up in the air. And Tolkien himself, quite frankly, I feel like most of the time when people were like, Tolkien, this is what you meant, right? He was like, no. Like most of the time he was like, no, this is based off of old lore and mythology and like very like, you know, I feel like as far as it was inspired by his life, he would say it was minimally inspired by his life. Yeah. Usually. But yeah, you know, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this. I just like it a lot. So if you have feedback, let us know. If you have other Tolkien works or movies or anything you want us to talk about, put it in the comment section and we will cover it eventually. Yeah. We're not going to just go straight through Tolkien because we want to keep it alive for everybody, including us. So who knows what we'll do next, but hit like, subscribe, and the bell. Leave comments.
And, yeah.
We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.